What is going down, my YouTube family? It is your boy Zeri from the XMG coming at you on a Thursday night to bring you the next installment of Battleground Breakdowns. We are going to touch briefly on the taunting mechanism. We are going to talk about what taunting brings to the game, when it's effective, when it isn't, some different combinations. But before we jump into that, if you're just finding me for the first time, please consider hitting that subscribe button. We are so very close to 900 subscribers, 100 away from the goal of 1K, not 100K, 1K subs. Huge milestone for the XMG family here. And if you are part of that family, thank you so much for the love, the support, everything you do to help me out. It is so much appreciated. Don't forget to turn on notifications, blah, 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 blah. If you want to consider helping out the channel, Patreon link is in the description below so I can get all that shameless plugging crap out of the way. Let's get into Defenders. Now, I have to say this. Defenders are near and dear to my heart. I've said on live streams and things like that, I used to play a lot of World of Warcraft. A lot of World of Warcraft. With, and you might have seen him on some streams. Hoss Boss, my counterpart, he was the healer and I was the tank. And we rocked that shit out and it was awesome. And I was in Alliance, before anybody asks. I was an Alliance Draenei, and I was a warrior. Started off with a pally tank, so Defenders, I don't know what it is, I just love them. And my name Zeri actually comes from my World of Warcraft character, where I searched tank names in an old school World of Warcraft generator, and Zeri was Nordic or Indian or Hindu or something for true protector or something like that. So I thought it sounded cool, so I went with it. So yeah, there is the breakdown of my name. But let's get into Defenders. Now, if you don't know what a Defender is, or what the taunting mechanism does, popping up on your screen, it's a statement from the game that says they must attack you. And you are essentially the meat shield, the sponge for your team, so your damage dealers can go. So I relish that role, I enjoy it, and I was pretty damn good at it. But the Defenders in this game, a little bit different, obviously. They still are your meat shield, they still are your sponge, and we're going to kind of talk a little bit about the tanks and what they bring, and what we're going to do is we're going to break down their taunting mechanism. Because their taunting mechanism should be more than just throwing up a taunt, and what makes them so valuable. So we're going to get into that, we're going to talk about that. Now the stats that you're going to hear me say are going to be at gear level 11. So let's talk a little bit about some stats that really matter for a tank, for a defender. Now, damage, sure, great, you can have damage, but that's not their role. Their role is not to do damage. Now, some of them might have another role, like a Tromgar stuns, and that's great, but that's his secondary role. His first role is to get that taunt up to keep your team members alive. So what you're really looking for is you're looking for health and shield. That health and shield combination is their survivability. You want them to be, there's a reason they're called tanks. They are beefy. They take the damage for you. They can take a punishment and keep on ticking. They are the defenders of the team. Now, speed. Speed is a tricky thing for a defender. You do not want your defender to go too fast, but you do not want your defender to go so slow where he's getting outpaced or lapped by the other team. And I found that putting your defender between 125 and the 140 range is a really good sweet spot to hit. And people might disagree with me, and that's fine. But that essentially is where I find to be the best. Now, Tromgar, I want a little faster so he can get that taunt up. So when he gets that taunt up, he does the counter chance. But like somebody like a Salvador, I would want a little bit slower so he can just sit there in his steel shell with his taunt up and just soak up the damage. And then the other thing is tenacity. Now, tenacity is finicky, and I'm not going to get into that, but I will tell you this one thing that I learned from Carfanax, from Nerd This. If you have not checked him out, you really should. And if you don't go all in on tenacity. It's really not worth it. There isn't enough tenacity in the world to really make a difference unless you just go for all tenacity rune sets with as much tenacity as you can. So some sprinkled in there, yes, does help, but you don't really need to go balls to the wall in tenacity. And I learned that from him, and I've backed off on that, and I've actually been way more successful. So Carfanax saves me again. That is kind of what we're going to get into. We're going to talk about, health and shield combinations and things like that. But like I was saying, the most important thing that they bring is their taunting mechanism. What does it do for the rest of your team? Does it do anything to help them out? Or does it just throw up a taunt and that's the end of it? So let's break this down a little bit per character. But before we get into the characters, we're going to break down their stats just a little bit here. And we are going to start with just some fun stats. The fastest tank in the game at no runes, gear level 11, all the way across, is Mr. Kelrin. He comes in at 138. So that is kind of interesting about him. Coming in second is Hilda. Hilda comes in at 122. Mega Wheel is third, coming in at 120. And then the bottom three, starting with the third slowest tank in the game, Mr. Kinley. Mr. Kinley comes in at a base speed of 105. Next on the list is Mr. Adam, the goblin tank everyone loves. 2C comes in at a base speed of 100. And very last in the game is Salvador. Salvador comes in at 95 speed. So like I was saying earlier, you kind of want him to be slow, but that's something you need to learn from your tank and its move kits, his move kit, and things like that. Now, Adam's taunting mechanism I'd love to show you. And it's on his passive ability. He has a 70% chance to gain taunt at the end of a turn for one turn. So he could possibly be a plug-and-play tank, but he isn't a plug-and-play tank at all. He's not going to help you there in the slightest. He is strictly a goblin tank when he has Goram by his side. So the one good thing about Adam is in a goblin team with Instructor Goram, he keeps his taunt pretty much the whole time. He comes in starting with a health and shield combination of right around 53-6, but if you just load up his health and load up his shield, especially with the Dr. Frank, he does become extremely tanky, and you would just want survivability. But as far as like making a team composition with Adam, you really don't want to go anywhere else outside of the goblin faction at all. Coming up next, we got our main man, Tromgar. Tromgar is an absolute monster. We all know Tromgar. We love him. His taunting mechanism is his second ability called the Shield of the People. He assumes a defensive stance. Using the ability again, switches into battle stance. This effect cannot be prevented or removed. In changing Tromgar's stance, he applies taunt and counterattack for 2 turns. So in his taunting mechanisms, he's giving himself counterattack, which plays into his basic and his stunning ability. His move is kind of not the best taunting mechanism in the game, and if he didn't stun on his basic, it would be absolute crap. But since he does stun on his basic, it's really good. Let's take a look here at Tromgar's stats and his health and shield combo, and that'll tell you a little bit more about him. Tromgar is the second highest health and shield combination in the game. He is at 65,361. He is an absolute monster of a tank, and he is extremely good. He can be plug and played in any single team. I don't care if it's clans or order or whatever. Tromgar could be your tank. Next up on the list, we got Little Baddie. Little Baddie is the human defender. Tromgar and her, are, in my opinion, are 1A and 1B, and they could go either way. But as far as a true defender, Little Baddie is more of a truer defender than Tromgar. But we could debate that all day. But Little Baddie is extremely good for a couple reasons, and what we want to do is we start off with her taunting mechanism. Deals 260% of physical damage to an enemy, also attacks 2 random enemies, and deals 130% of physical damage. Dealing damage with this ability removes 1 buff. Little Baddie gains taunt for 2 turns. So she has a little mini AoE, 3 enemy AoE, and the damage goes down as she hits, but that doesn't matter. She's applying taunt, but she's also removing a buff. Random, of course, but fantastic. If you go against somebody like a Tromgar and you throw that and you remove his counter, Tromgar's a sitting duck, essentially. Now, we didn't talk about, much other move kits besides Tromgar's stun. Little Baddie does have a turn meter removal on her basic at an 80% clip, and she can blind. So she brings some more to the table than just being a taunting tank. So that is really, really good. But again, she really just shines in human. Little Baddie comes in at a health and shield combination is the 4th best in the game at 60,400, base speed of 115. So she does a really good job of staying alive, and you stack some potency on her and some survivability, and she will do you very, very good. Up next is Mr. Mega Wheel. Also, not everybody's favorite defender, but Mega Wheel does bring some good things to the table, paper-wise. And what I mean there is, let's just start with that. Paper-wise, Mega Wheel has the highest health and shield combination in the game at 65,836. Wow. His shield is 37,572 to start. So that's huge. His health is on the lower side. He doesn't break 30,000 on his health. But starting with 65, almost 66k health and shield combination is a really, really good place to be. He does take a while to get down. Now, his taunting mechanism is actually not that bad. He gains taunt, cheat death for 2 turns, removes 2 debuffs, and recovers 25% health. So he's restoring his health, so you want to stack him with health, even though that's lower end than shield, but that kind of works out. If you're ruining him, you can rune for health over shield. Removing 2 buffs from himself is fantastic, and then his taunt, cheat death, putting it on the tank is beautiful. The thing about Mega Wheel is, one, he's extremely hard to gear. He could be the most gear-hungry character in the game, and I actually stopped gearing him to get more Doom. He is not really vital to the more Doom team, so he could be a secondary tank you're looking at for one of those 4th, 5th, 6th teams in the battleground. So when he's taunting, he is his own dispeller. But what he really needs to make his kit work is he spreads this mechanism called Pain on his basic. He can do that up to 5 times, and then he does like an AoE where he removes all the pain and does some crazy amount of damage. His passive ability, he increases his critical chance, which is odd for a tank. I don't really like his passive ability, but he could be one of those characters, and what he will give you is he will give you a taunt on the 2nd turn, and he will give you somebody who you can make pretty tanky. Next up is Kinley, and I love me some Kinley. I fell in love with him during the noob series, and he does bring a lot to the game. His taunting mechanism is absolutely phenomenal. At level 6, he gains taunt and a dodge increase for 2 turns, removes 2 debuffs, recovers 25% health. So much like Mega Wheel, instead of cheat death, he's gaining dodge. And I actually like the dodge. It's really good. It plays into the pandas kit. Again, he's dispelling himself and recovering his health. So just absolutely fantastic. What you want out of a tank. And what he brings otherwise to the party is his passive ability is just really, really good for a tank. At the start of his turn, he recovers 20% of his health, just by doing nothing but going. What a wonderful passive for a tank. Now, he is one of the better leaderships for the pandas, but if you don't have a panda team ready to go, he could definitely fill in on a lower end order team as a tank. If you have like Snorri, Eric Shieldbreaker, some of your bottom humans, he could be a tank for them in that aspect. Very, very good. At gear level 11, he does come in at the 5th best tank at health and shield combination with 59,724. So, he is about middle of the road, and that's exactly where I'd put him in the grand scheme of tanks. I would probably put him in the middle, and he just does really basic good things and definitely can help your team out get some things done in Battleground. Next up, we have Kelrin. Kelrin is the elf defender, and I do not like Kelrin at all. His taunting mechanism, taunt and a tenacity increase for 2 turns, removes 2 debuffs, and recovers 25% health. So we're seeing a trend. Taunt, something else, 2 debuffs removed, and health. And that's good. Tenacity increase is okay. You know, his taunting mechanism isn't the problem. You can do it on the first move, which is a huge plus. But then it kind of goes downhill from there. His passive ability increases his magic armor by 25% in each living elf in the party. Magic armor is really good. I mean, there's a lot of AoE shredders out there, but he just drops. Physical damage, like a Snorri, Reval, they just cut right through him, and he just drops like a sack of potatoes. Early on in the game, he is not that bad because he can taunt early, but as the later game progresses, he is just a hot mess, and I really do not prefer him at all. But again, he could be a defender for you. He is just below Kinley at 56,255 health, so he is 3,500 less than Kinley. So keep that in mind. But he could fill in and possibly be something you need to get done. He has like a mini AoE in his move kit where he puts on an armor decrease for 2 turns. And then his basic does nothing really. If the target is the lowest health in the party, the attack is guaranteed to land a critical hit. Under a Nightiel lead or a Thaleen lead, that would be a positive, but for you in kind of a mishmash comp, it's not really much to squawk at. Up next is Hilda. She's interesting. Let's start with her taunting mechanism. She gains taunt for 2 turns, decreases all enemy turn meter by 20%. If Snorri is an ally, they both gain damage increase for 2 turns. So this is interesting to me because I love the turn meter manipulation. She gets taunt for 2 turns. It can be used right away. And she has some synergy with Snorri. Now, you really can't get it to work the way you want it to work. But in the grand scheme of things, she is a pretty decent tank for what she does. So what does she do? She's a good secondary tank. And I'm going to go into some team compositions. But she is a very good secondary tank. If you are building possibly a timeout team or something like that where a couple healers, couple defenders, and a massive damage dealer, she's definitely a plus for your second defender. She brings in the turn meter reduction. She can taunt on her first turn. She'll soak up that damage. Her passive ability here increases her shield size by 15,000. So definitely a plus of who you could make there. If you're looking for a lower end 5th team and your Dr. Frank isn't up and running, you put your Dr. Frank with a Hilda who already has a very good shield size. That could be a combination, you know, just to kind of throw a team together. She has a spear throw, which just gains an armor she gains an armor increase and a tenacity increase for 2 turns. And she does some pretty decent damage to be a tank. And she's restoring her shield, so she's not a #1 tank in my opinion. I've seen her in high-end range of arena, and I can always get around her. But as a secondary tank, she just does a really, really good job with that. And health and shield combination is the lowest in the game for a defender, coming in at 50,265. So she's not that survivable. She is not as tanky as you want her to be, and that could be an issue. That's why she is perfect for that secondary tank role. Then we have Salvador. Salvador is just a true tank. Doesn't do anything but sit there and soak up the damage and makes your team survivable. His taunting mechanism, he just deals damage and taunts. It's probably the worst taunting mechanism out there. But what makes Salvi so good is his Steel Shell ability. His Steel Shell ability pretty much makes him invincible. His Steel Shell ability gains Steel Shell for 2 turns, decreases damage by 90%, and gains a 50% chance to gain debuff immunity. Steel Shell can be used on his first move. Taunting mechanism can be used on his first move. Also, Salvador can be the only tank to have a pre-taunt in this game. If he's paired with Hera, he can be that. Now, the drawbacks of Salvador is his magic damage is awful. If he does not have a Steel Shell up, and you take in somebody like a Nightiel, a Freezard, an Ember, you can, a more doom. You're going to smoke this guy if he doesn't have his steel shell up. If he has his steel shell up, it's a different story. But if he doesn't, it's game over. Passive just is another reason why. His physical armor, it goes up by 35% with an additional 5% for each living pride in the party. Salvador is at his best with a pride team with a hero leadership. Hands down. But he can be used as a plug-and-play tank. And just so you can see how tanky he is, Salvador is the third best health and shield combination at 60,466. I love me some Salvador, my favorite pride character. And last but not least, we have Darian. We all know Darian, his taunting mechanism as such. Gains taunt, armor increase, removes 2 debuffs, recovers 25% health. Shocking. But all in all, the armor increase is okay, I guess. But again, he's dispelling himself, can be used on his first turn, and recovers 25% health. Not that bad, but in Battlegrounds, you're most likely going to be using him for his leadership, so you can take him in for his leadership if you have to on a 5th, 6th squad, and you get a tank out of that. Now, his health and shield combination come in at the third worst at 54,058. So he could be used as a plug-and-play tank, but you're probably in Battlegrounds going to most likely be using him as a leader and then just getting his tank benefit from there. So here we are in my arena, and I'm just going to kind of show you some team compositions that I've found. Now, you have your basic comp that looks like this. You have your leader, your damage dealer, possibly a healer, your support character, healer support character, which is the role of Hard Orc. We have our damage dealers in Mordoom and Corcoran. And then we have our tank in the defender spot, which is Stromgar. So that's your basic build, generic build, which everybody knows. Now in Battlegrounds, you're going to be looking to hold on defense. So what could possibly hold on defense? But you got to be able to beat a team, so you need a little defense, you need a little offense. So what can you put there? Now this isn't something I'm recommending, I'm just showing you a composition, so let's take a look at it. And it's something kind of like this. You have a leadership ability, you have 2 tanks, 2 healers, and then a damage dealer. And what that does is you can't really focus on anybody to bring them down. You get 1 tank down and they've taunted and, you know, they got them to about yellow health. Boom, they get healed. Then they drop the taunt. The other tank picks up the taunt. And it just kind of goes back and forth. Then you have somebody in there who can do damage. Now, I probably should have put somebody maybe like an Ember in there to show it a little better. You know, she has an AoE or a Freezard. AoE abilities, probably Freezard is actually, if I was building a team, Freezard would probably be better, but I'm not breaking up my human team. But you know what I'm saying, is Freezard's in there, he does the AoE, you burn him down, you can't really get to him because all of the healing and all of the tanks. So that is a possibility for a team composition in Battlegrounds. So it just is a defensible composition. You could take this team or a team like this in, and it might give some people some fits, and you might be able to hold just a little bit longer. So who are some people that you can take against your defenders? Who are you going to have success with? Some people that you want to take in to have success against the defenders, obviously people who can dispel. Nightiel. Passive ability, she removes 1 debuff from herself and Solius, and then we also removes 1 random buff from an enemy, so stripping that taunt can be pretty exciting. We talked about it, but a tank itself, Little Baddie, can strip a taunt with her shield throw. Oh, wrong one. With her taunting mechanism, she can actually remove a buff. So that is something you want to keep in mind. And, you know, then we have somebody, so people who can dispel are pretty important to going against a tank. And those are just some examples. Now, some other examples of people is somebody like an ability blocker. Somebody like a Hard Orc can put ability block on the tank for 2 turns. Somebody with a debuff immunity like a Zera, she would be very vital. One of the newer characters to the game, Count Delman, has his Mark of Death, where he kind of makes anybody taunt. So that is an option if you have Count Delman where you want him, who can be pretty important to facing tanks, especially if you come across that 2-tank combination, is Puncherface. Puncherface has his Earthquake ability where he applies Taunt if he passes the Potency Tenacity check for 2 turns on the whole team. So that helps you get around those pesky taunts. We also have to talk about Cruel quickly. She has I Am the Knight, which makes the defender turn invisible. You essentially drop his taunt and then you can go after whoever you want. So those are just some options and some things to think about if you are going against a defender and when you're making your team composition for Battlegrounds. So everybody, that's what I got for you today. I just wanted to talk just a little bit about defenders, just kind of what they bring to the table, what you're looking for from them, and a couple team compositions to think about for Battlegrounds, and possibly some counters to tanks that you can't get around. So, you know, people might have known this, some people might not have, so I hope it helps somebody out there. So let me know down below, who is your favorite tank in the game? And why are they your favorite tank? And my favorite, truest tank is the man right in front of me, Salvador. If there was a turtle class in the World of Warcraft, I would have been a turtle. No doubt about it. So that's what I got for everybody today. This video's dragged on long enough. So I'll see you in the next one. I love y'all. Don't forget to subscribe. All that crap. I'm out.